Hello, and coming up on today's show. Following the Prime Minister's scrapping of HS2 north of Birmingham, HS2 is branded very poor value for money by the Public Accounts Committee, but that's only half the story. And is Labour about to unveil its plans for its own vision of rail renationalisation? And is it back to the bad old days of curly sandwiches and stale pork pies? Hello, and welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and
from me, Richard Bowker.
Here to blather about trains and politics and strategy again, and don't we love it? If you're enjoying Green Signals, please give the episode a thumbs up if you're watching us on YouTube, as an increasing number of people are, and please hit that subscribe button. This really does help us to grow the show and do lots more of what you want and would like to see. And you could also visit greensignals.org, our website, and sign up for our mailing list so that we can let you know when we publish new episodes. And we also send out exclusive content from time to time, so don't miss that. We also, as ever, are really enjoying reading your comments on YouTube and everywhere else, Twitter and goodness knows what, X. Sorry, I can't get used to that. We always try to respond personally to as many as we can, so please do keep letting us know what you think.
Absolutely. And apologies that it is taking maybe a little bit of time to respond. I mean, we are literally overwhelmed with stuff at the moment, but it's fantastic. We've had some really lovely, really nice comments after the interview we did with Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of ASLEF. Yeah, they were great. Brian Newton said, thank you all once again. I'm pretty exhausted after that, but so it was simply brilliant. Well, we were, but then he said, but it was simply brilliant. Tony Wilson said on X, he said, what a fascinatingly fabulous podcast. Listening to Mick Whelan explaining all the ins and outs of the reason behind the current period and indeed past and future of strikes was a real eye-opener. Something news reporters or programmes fail to get across. I loved that. Fascinatingly fabulous. What a great phrase.
And nicely alliterated as well. So maybe we'll use fascinatingly fabulous again. Maybe we ought to use it as a brand motto.
It is. It's very good. Then Rare Track Rob, that's his handle, said, just finished listening. This was superb. An adult conversation asking clear, sometimes challenging questions, then giving the interviewee the time and space to answer. No talking over them, always polite, nothing else. So refreshing compared to what we usually see in the mainstream media. So that was nice.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And Martin Adam Haynes said, I love this one.
Yes.
Can't say this more clearly. This latest episode of Green Signals is an absolute must-watch in capital letters, exclamation mark. Well, we're hardly going to disagree with that, Martin. Actually, we feel sort of the same about all the shows, really.
We do.
I think the thing that came out loud and clear from some of the other comments, though, Nigel, we've got to at least try and get the Rail Minister onto Green Signals if we can. I wonder if Hugh Merriman would be as open and as bold as Mick Whelan was?
Well, I hope we'll find out. And as a bit of stop press, I can tell you that our General Manager Steph has issued the invitation to Hugh's office. So we should just wait and see now, and we will tell you all what we get. And I hope it's an acceptance, and he can come along and talk about it. If he says no, we'll let you know that as well. Can't say fairer than that, can we? And let's be clear and serious. Hugh is a knowledgeable and committed guy when it comes to the railway. He has proved that by making the effort to get out and about and meet people around the network this last few months. And we genuinely hope he'll say yes. And we'll keep everyone posted. And Hugh, if you're watching this, it's offered in the same spirit as we offered the invitation to Mick. No tripwires, no sort of ambushes. We just genuinely want to have a serious and objective conversation. It's right, isn't it, Richard?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do that with absolutely everybody.
We do. We even do it with each other, which is quite something.
Most of the time, yeah.
Talking of keeping everyone posted, we were disappointed, though not really surprised, to learn that the Freedom of Information request submitted recently by Green Signaller Richard Hunt was rejected. For those of you who aren't familiar with this one, we asked in episode 12 how often Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is travelling by helicopter, because if we knew that, we could work out what the CO2 cost environmentally is compared with taking the train. Richard Hunt submitted the FOI through the What Do They Know website, and last week it was rejected. Hey, Richard.
It was. I mean, we'll put the link on the website so everybody can see the exactly what was said to us. Essentially, it's been rejected on the grounds of national security, really, which is one of the exemptions that can be used. Government argued that, I quote, the release of individual pieces of information, while they may seem innocuous in themselves, would allow hostile actors to build up a picture of spending on travel and on security arrangements for the protection of government ministers and officials. Now, some might think that's a bit over the top, maybe even a bit ridiculous. Personally, I think it's actually quite difficult to argue because we don't actually know where he went, right? So I think we've hit probably a bit of a brick wall with that one, for the moment at least, but we'll certainly keep watching it.
I think I fall into some might think it's a bit of a ridiculous response, Richard.
You do surprise me.
How is it a security risk for the Prime Minister in the future for us to know simply how many one-off journeys he's made here and there in the past? Using the security risk catch-all, to me, just smacks of slipperiness, I'm afraid. Mind you, frequently being dealt BS by government for 40 years does leave you rather jaded, I admit. So maybe I'm being a bit unreasonable in this instance, but it is frustrating, and we're certainly going to keep our eyes open for opportunities to get to the bottom of this one. Maybe we should just start our own informal news watch and count, and where we do see him going somewhere by chopper, we should start logging it for a snapshot, and we'll use that. Now, on to the news. And as ever, like the weather, there's plenty of it. HS2 has been branded poor value for money by the powerful and influential Public Accounts Committee, led by Dame Meg Hillier, who, as Richard and may agree, is a formidable lady and not to be trifled with, has published the verdict on Rishi Sunak's insane, we think, decision to cancel Phase 2 of HS2, and the PAC comments are utterly damning. Well, beyond damning, you might say. This will be very uncomfortable reading at the feckless DFT. Meg Hillier's team arrived at 6 conclusions. Please bear with me, not only because of my throat, because this is not a moment to simplify and exaggerate, which journalism often does, even us. It really is worth reading their formal conclusions out as they offered them. So, are you sitting comfortably? Here they come. HS2 now offers very poor value for money to the taxpayer, and the department and HS2 Limited, do not yet know what they expect the final benefits of the programme to be. Costs have continued to escalate, and the department and HS2 Limited do not know how much the programme will now cost. Let that sink in. The department and HS2 Limited do not yet know what the impact of the decision to cancel Phase 2 will be on the HS2 programme and how HS2 Limited will need to adapt so it can be successfully delivered. Developing Euston is dependent on attracting private finance to pay for it, but the department does not yet have any plan for how to do so and has to make the investment decision soon to protect long-term value for money. The department and HS2 Limited do not yet know when they will dispose of land and property no longer needed and how they will balance different interests. And finally, the department has yet to finalise what the redirected £36 billion at 2023 prices originally intended for the cancelled HS2 phases will fund or decide on when these projects can be expected to start. Now, if that was your school report, it might say, not trying, must do better to avoid major failure. Richard, you've had the joy of sitting in front of and being grilled by the PAC, And it's about as tough a gig as they come, isn't it? Is this as bad as it gets for the DFT?
Given the amount of money involved here, this is pretty bad. Yes. I have sat in front of the PAC, and you're absolutely right. It is a tough gig. I did it as the accounting officer of the Strategic Rail Authority, sat there on my own. There was a big audience. They're a pretty serious panel. Edward Lee was the chairman at the time. And they don't take kindly to obfuscation or prevarication, really. They can mess your life up. This is a serious group of people.
Richard, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Could you just give us a sentence on what accounting officer means in these terms? Because that's pretty serious. I guess you mean accounting officer for the SRA, yeah?
Correct. So when you are the accounting officer of a government department or a spending department, or in the case of the SRA, we were what was called a non-departmental public body, an ND, or Quango, if you like. You're still responsible personally to Parliament for the money, right? And how it's spent. Money. Correct, yeah. Because as we know, there's only two sources of money for the railway. So you're personally responsible for it. And when you become an accounting officer, you kind of get told this is really, really serious. Take it very, very seriously indeed. And the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, is the parliamentary committee that examines value for money within government projects, programs, and services. So it's not just capital; it's sort of it's operating as well. It draws on the work of a thing called the National Audit Office, which does exactly what it sounds like, a government department that audits how money's spent. And it holds government officials, or in my case, a Quango, to account for I think they say the economy, the efficiency and the effectiveness of government in spending of taxes, right? So it's a serious thing. And although when you read those conclusions out, the sort of hairs are sort of standing on the back of my neck, really, because it's pretty kind of heavy stuff. You talked about the DFT and HS2 Limited. I think it is fair to say that very much this is DFT, yeah. I think, because they are the spending department here and they are the client for the project.
So they can't say this is HS2, not us.
Well, they can try, but they won't get very far, right? And I do have a little bit of sympathy for the DFT. I think we all should have, because really, they were, certainly HS2, and I'm not even sure the DFT were in the room when the Prime Minister decided to cancel the project, right? So they're a little bit sort of playing catch up here. But if you put into plain English what I think the PAC have said is this: you've completely knackered the business case for HS2 by cancelling the legs to Manchester to Leeds. You still don't know how much it's going to cost. You don't know what the impact on the programme is of cancelling the bits you've cancelled. You've said you want to do with Euston with private finance, but you've got absolutely no plan about to do that. You've still no plan to sell the land you bought, creating more uncertainty. And with our favourite thing, Network North, you've no idea what to spend the 36 billion on, when you'll spend it, and what benefits it will deliver. But apart from that, you're in pretty good shape. I mean, it is. If I were the permanent secretary of a spending department reading that, I'd be pretty ashamed, really. That's even if I knew I'd been dropped right in it, which I think they have. That is pretty bad, and it is tough. I know we've said it again before. Say it again. This isn't really of the DFT's making. You can't castigate. Well, actually, let me rewind a bit. They have been client for a very, very long time, and we'll come back to talking about the competency of officials to be clients for these major projects. But this decision to cancel is, that was done to them rather than anything else. But basically, the PAC is saying this is a total shambles and it's completely out of control. You need to get your act together. That's pretty bad.
It is. That's totally humiliating for the DFT. And it gets worse, doesn't it, Richard? Because Jurgen Maier, who is conducting an infrastructure delivery review for Labour and Louise Haigh, appears to be saying it is now not possible to do Phase 2 early. He said, the wording of Keir Starmer's statement was that we can't bring back HS2 as it was originally conceived. Sorry, I'm not convinced of that as far as Phase 2A is concerned, but my understanding is that creating higher capacity through other more cost-effective and innovative means, whatever that means, is not ruled out by Maier. I think Phase 2A remains eminently doable, if for no other reason, Richard, as you keep pointing out, it's got its Act of Parliament. And most of the land needed too. Politics is the only reason stopping 2A being resuscitated.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question as to why he said that, and of course Andy Burnham and Andy Street in the talking about when they talk about their alternative, they're very clear they are not resurrecting HS2. So is that, have they missed the fact that there is an Act of Parliament for Phase 2A? No, they clearly haven't, right? I wonder, and this is, green signals health warning, this is speculation, right? We don't know. But I wonder if, they've done some polling on HS2 and everybody's just decided it's just not a phrase that lands well at the moment. You just can't use it. So, it's almost like we probably will. I really hope we will end up with putting a new high-speed line on the Phase 2A alignment, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I suspect what Jurgen's having to do and what Andy Street and Andy Burnham having to do is that old thing of saying, I know if it walks like a duck and looks like a duck and goes quack, it's a duck. On this occasion, we've just decided it's a hippopotamus, right? Whatever you do, don't call it that, right? It might be the same blinking thing, but just don't call it that word that gets everybody terribly excited and frothing at the mouth.
You mean that the brand HS2 in that respect has become a bit toxic in referred to that? And
I think so.
The minute people hear it, they switch off. So there's no point in going out to bat for it.
I fear that's the case. But the problem is if you don't build something on the alignment that is currently protected under and has powers under the West Midlands to Crewe High-Speed Railway Act or whatever it's called, then anything else will take 6, 8, 10 years to go and get, because you'll need to go and get powers. You have to almost kind of start again. If you want to look at small schemes to improve bottlenecks, I can tell you, anybody wants to come and see the scars on my back from the West Coast route modernisation, I'll tell you, it doesn't fix the problem in the way that HS2 fixes the problem.
Costs a fortune and delivers hardly any of the capacity you want.
Well, it probably delivers quite a bit, but it doesn't deliver it doesn't deliver the long-term step change, and there's massive disruption whilst you do it. I mean, these are highly disruptive projects. So, I keep saying the same thing. We've got to get a new high-speed line built on that alignment. I really don't care what we call it anymore, but that is the right alignment. And if it's not high speed, and this is I'm sure Andy Burnham and Andy Street's very clever advisors have spotted this. If it's not high speed, it runs the risk of actually causing real issues in terms of the amount of rolling stock you need, the turnarounds you need at terminus stations. I know these sounds like detail that bore politicians sometimes, but they're actually what makes it work. So, let's not mess around. Phase 2A is really important.
So are we taking a green signals decision on the hoof here that we shall refer to Phase 2A in future as the Stafford bypass?
Yeah, well, fine. The West Midlands Crewe link, the anything, the hippopotamus line, as I've just christened it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what we call it,
but not HS2.
Well, that would appear to be the narrative. Yeah,
that makes eminent sense. I saw some discussion on Twitter this morning from William Barter, who was making the point about even if only 5 minutes are cost, it has a major impact in platform occupation time and all sorts of other knock-on events which screw up the capacity and the usability of the railway, which is why you're doing it in the first place. And you put your finger on something important, Richard. It does bore politicians, so they don't discuss it and they don't take the right decisions on it. We've got to try and keep the feet to the fire and keep this focused, haven't we? Which rather neatly brings us on to the news that Labour is apparently preparing to unveil plans in the next 2 or 3 weeks to renationalise Britain's railways. Richard, I think we're both especially underwhelmed by Michael Bowe's piece in the Telegraph a few days ago.
Well, actually, two pieces in the august body that is the Daily Telegraph. Nigel, I give you exhibit one.
Okay, right? I'm listening.
There was a piece by a chap called Gareth Caulfield on the 24th of January, which I've got it here actually, and he is commenting on the Conservative Home sort of transport conference that took place on the 18th of January, where Mark Harper was the keynote speaker and Hugh Merriman spoke and so on and so forth. And he quotes Mr. Harper as saying the following. Are you sat comfortably? If you gripped your chair.
I am, as you say, I am gripping my chair because I suspect I know what's coming.
Let train firms run the railways, not the government. And then he goes on to say, and in fact, I think the last thing you want is a politician having a vision for exactly how to map out the detail. That should be driven by what customers want. This from a Secretary of State who is presiding over arguably the most micromanaged period of Britain's railway since World War II. In fact, this is probably a complete diversion. When I read that, I was reminded of that fantastic scene in the Woody Allen film, Annie Hall, which if you know it, it's Dwayne is recounting he's confessing to a slightly sort of dark dream he has, and Woody Allen's listening. And then Woody Allen says, well, that's great, thanks, Dwayne. Anyway, better go. I'm due back on planet Earth. And I don't know why suddenly that came to mind. It's just, how can you say that? How can you actually say, I think the train firms should be running the railways? It just slightly beggars belief.
I think I must have slipped through a gap in the space-time continuum into a place where governments are doing the right thing, because I don't disagree with a word that Mark Harper says, but they're doing exactly the opposite. As you said, how can he say that with a straight face? It beggars belief, doesn't it? And a sort of big question, is he stupid or does he think we are, or both? Because does he really think that? Or does he not see the irony of making a comment like that when everybody in the railway world is saying exactly the same thing and he's doing exactly the opposite? Does he think we're fooled by it?
No, I don't think any of these people are stupid. I really don't. Right? I think they're actually.
We are then.
No, I wonder whether there is just a disconnect in the process. I know we've joked about this when we've been sat having sort of other chats over the years. Having spent a few years working in the Strategic Rail Authority, along with the Department for Transport, I now can't really watch Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister. I find it almost slightly painful. It's stopped being a sitcom for me. It's more like a documentary or a training video, And I wonder whether it's possible that he thinks they're not micromanaging, but doesn't really know the detail. That is possible. Or he does know and he's not sure. I don't know. But one thing is for certain. You're right. What he said is fair enough. It's just not what they're doing.
No.
But the Telegraph then outdid themselves with Exhibit 2. And I honestly think this is one of the most appalling pieces of railway-related journalism I've seen in a very long time. And I have to say, 30 years, the bar's quite low when it comes to that. And it's really bad, I think. Personal opinion, right? So Michael Bowe wrote on the 3rd of February about what he called the looming renationalisation of rail under Labour, in a piece that was so full of hackneyed tropes. It was bursting at the seams with stuff that made you groan out loud. It was quite funny, actually, because the lead photograph was a picture of a Mark III coach in BR days. Looked actually quite inviting. Well, all the seats lined up with the windows for a start, so that was quite good.
You mean this one?
I mean that one, yes. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what we've just held up to the camera. If you're not, if you're listening, you go, what is he talking about?
It's all part of our distinctive approach.
In this article, we had a Morecambe and Wise gag about pies with welded crusts. We had This was good. Claims that during the 70s and 80s, British Rail was seen as the epitome of all that was wrong with Britain. Well, I've got a few more candidates that would beat that, I have to say. But the worst of all, I thought, was British Rail's intercity service later became associated with football hooliganism and widespread decay, which added to the gloom. I mean, blimey.
What?
I mean, so he sounded like he was seriously suggesting that when the railways were privatised, football hooligans, right, in inverted commas, decided that travelling on trains to matches was no longer for them. But as soon as the railways are back in public ownership, they'll rediscover their proletariat roots and come back in droves and trash the trains. I mean, it's just so completely ridiculous, right?
And then it gets worse, Richard, doesn't it?
It gets worse. He then quotes that titan of rational discourse when it comes to the railways, Sir John Redwood.
The Vulcan.
And this is a quote from what Sir John Redwood is apparently said. Passenger numbers fell away through the nationalised years. They didn't make rail a popular and attractive enough way of travelling. There were too many delays, too many cancellations, poor service, poor catering, so it wasn't attractive to passengers.
Imagine that.
Well, I am not, and I work quite hard not to be political as a certainly on this podcast, but I have to say, I was not sure when reading that whether John Redwood was describing the last few years of BR pre-privatisation or the current situation after 13 years of a Conservative government, right? That is about as political as you'll ever hear me be. But, I mean, it's just, just talk about can't see the wood for the trees. I mean, I thought it was quite an embarrassing piece, to be honest. So.
We threw the looking glass with it. It is just ludicrous. Anyway, that sets the scene nicely, I suppose, Richard, for us to have a bit of a to and fro about what Labour might mean by taking back control of the railway into public ownership. So I suppose a quick and dirty summary, which I've exercised many times on media interviews, is contrary to public belief, the passenger services, with the exception of open access, have always been and never out of public ownership, but they have been operated on short-term contracts, or a contract to some degree, Chiltern was 20 years, by the private sector, but they remained in public ownership. So they are in public ownership and always have been. Network Rail, since it was taken into as part of the DfT, is also in public ownership, which means that the railway effectively, the passenger railway, because we're not talking about freight here, is in public ownership. So how are they going to take it back in public ownership? And for the purpose of this conversation, I am assuming that the Roscoes are going to be left well alone because they will not be able to afford to renationalise them and buy that lot back. Full stop, discuss, as the A-level papers used to say.
Okay, no, right. Well, Roscoe's is interesting. There's a huge amount of capital sat on the balance sheet of the Roscoe's, or the entities that own them, and so it is a bit hard to see what the real value would be of unwinding that. I mean, but so yeah, I get the point about the Roscoe's, but let's just go on to what you talk about the railway being effectively in public ownership. You're absolutely right about Network Rail, no question. I mean, that's on the PSBR, has been for quite some time. So that is a bona fide, that is nationalised, right, for all want of a better phrase. And certainly since the management contracts came in post-COVID, that's pretty much the reality of where the train operating companies are, certainly other than the open access ones. So you're right. What's going to be different? Well, I think the real problem is for an incoming government, the only thing they know with some certainty is that they can't do nothing, right? And the reason they can't do nothing is because, A, we've got a separation between where the cost sits and where the revenue sits in terms of the department and the Treasury. So absolutely nobody is thinking about this as a business anymore. There's no desire, there doesn't seem any desire to grow it, and that's not good. So that is a real problem. And yet the private concession operators, I'm going to call them that, the train companies, are still taking a 2% management fee for doing this. And when you apply that over a very, very big revenue number, because the railway is still a huge revenue number, 2% also a very, very big number. So you can't really carry on as you are because reliability is pretty poor, cancellations are pretty poor. We've got a major dispute still rumbling on with ASLEF. I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy. Whatever we do, we can't carry on with this. So the question is, what do you do? We can't go back to the privatised model. I mean, that's just politically unacceptable. And also, I'm not sure the private sector would know how to price the risk at the moment of doing this. So that would be really quite problematic. So you've got to do something. I suspect the answer lies in something along the lines of Great British Railways, GBR, because I don't, joking apart, what the Williams review came up with was broadly sensible, right?
It was, and I agreed with it.
The only difference for me, and I've said this many, many times on X and even on here, I would just move from a guiding mind, which feels to me like a bit of a sort of soft touch, to a directing mind. Because if we sort out a boring, predictable, reliable railway, the people will come back. I really, really believe that.
They absolutely will.
That's my bottom line in this. How they would do it, we've got to wait and see.
So I wonder if we can get Louise Haigh here to actually explain what is going to happen and how is it going to be different. So we've seen lots of talk in the papers with people breezily saying, "Oh, it's really straightforward. You just let the existing contracts expire and take them back into public ownership without compensation," which baffles me a bit. Maybe you might have a comment on that. But what happens then? Do they go into operators of last resort? Do they go into Gisby Rail along with South Eastern, TPE, Northern and LNER and carry on working for OLR? Are we going to see direct operation of trains and railways like quite a few people have said they would like to see? And I'm afraid that scares me witless. And yes, I said witless. Because it seems to me that wherever government runs something directly, they do a pretty poor job of it. I mean, the NHS does a great job of dispensing care, but there seems to be pretty universal agreement that it's very badly managed. And that's government management, effectively, isn't it? How is it going to work? Is it going to be OLR? Is it going to be direct control? Is it going to be GB? I mean, if you were sat in a room as an advisor, Richard, what would be going through your mind?
Well, on your compensation point, I mean, why do you, I mean, just as a general commercial contract point, if a contract just comes to its natural end.
Exactly.
That's it. It just comes to a natural end, right? So
no need to compensate.
I think that's a bit of an overcomplication, or somebody's just assuming something that just isn't really an issue. I don't honestly know how. There's so many different ways of doing it. But I tell you, I keep coming back to the same thing time and time and time again. And we talked about it a little while ago when we were talking about the HS2 PAC hearing. Government departments are really good at policy, and they're really good at making sure that big picture macro stuff from a policy point of view is well thought through and well articulated. But it is countercultural for them to deliver commercial entities or commercial contracts or relationships. That's not, I've said this before, they're very good at working out how to try and avoid risk, not so good at working out how to manage it. It's not in the DNA. So whatever we do in the future, I'm afraid, for me, it cannot involve the DfT in the same level of management of the railway that it does today. And really, you can come up with any model you like as long as it doesn't have that bit in it.
Which puts you in agreement with Mark Harper in that quote we had earlier.
Well, there's the thing. Possibly, I don't know. It's about 10 minutes ago, so it's probably, we might have a different position now. I don't know. There's loads and loads of different ways of thinking this through, but all roads for me come back to let the government should set the policy and the parameters, but then please allow the professionals with years of experience and knowledge to do the operations and the delivery and empower them to grow the business. And if we do that, it will grow and it will become a self-fulfilling virtuous prophecy, if you like.
Well, indeed, it's a variation on that classic management thing, isn't it? Of finding great people and then getting out the way to let them get on with it. So,
yes.
Okay.
Anyway, moving on from policy, we go to the quiz.
Yay! A bit of light relief among all the heavy stuff.
Well, so last week's question, if you remember, was what is... Okay, right. I know. I did walk into that, right. Okay. What is steam fireman Tommy Bray's claim to fame, and who was the driver that he will forever be associated with? Well, loads of you got the right answer. First in, though, with the correct answer this time was Richard Hill, 1978. So I'm guessing Richard Hill on YouTube. And this is what he had to say. And I'll read it all because it's really good. This. Thanks, Nigel. The welcome at the end noted. I wonder what percentage start at the back of a podcast. If you remember, some people were being very sneaky and going to the end of the podcast to listen to the questions so they could get in first anyway. But he did get the right answer as well. He said, Joseph Duddington was the driver with Fireman Bray on the Mallard world record speed run of 126 miles per hour for steam trains, steam locomotives, sorry, oh heavens, on Sunday, July the 3rd, 1938. So well done, Richard. And we are going to have to think about sort of trying to hide the quiz somewhere in the middle, or so that you can't do what you so cleverly did. But well done. So this week's question, and the quiz is another one of our what took place on this day ones. And the question is, these are good ones, aren't they?
Yeah.
What took place on British Railways for the very last time on the 30th of September, 1972? Usual rules, if you think you know, tweet or send us an email or put a comment on YouTube. And as ever, the first person to get the right answer gets a shout out.
Indeed. I have to ask, where are the ... mugs?
Well, the ... mugs. I have actually had an email from the supplier who said, and I don't know where they're being shipped from, but the email I quite literally said, due to unpleasant circumstances, there is a delay. I think they meant unforeseen circumstances, but they may well be unpleasant as well. I have no idea.
They could be stuck on a cargo ship in the Red Sea or something, or going around the Cape of Good Hope.
Well, that is possible, isn't it? Yeah, I doubt it. They're probably coming from a factory in Stevenage or something. I don't know. But anyway, but they are delayed, and they have apologised, and they did offer me the chance to have a refund. I said, no, we want the mugs.
We want the mugs.
So we await the mugs.
Jolly good. I'm looking forward to waving one around here, as you will, no doubt, and we can offer them as a prize, possibly, for the question. Because they will be a bit unique. What a stupid thing to say. They will be rare among folk out the railway community out there. Right, on to our new upbeat feature, and I have a lovely story for you here. Viewer-listener Martin Moore, who's a former EMAP journalist, actually, who once worked alongside me at EMAP on the 5th floor at Apex House in Peterborough. He was a photo magazine's editor, and a very good one, who says, quote, the way I've been drawn so deeply into your world through green signals surprises and delights me. Delights us as well, Martin. He says he'll be visiting the new station library at Kent's Bank too during the summer. Well, give me a call, Martin. I might just come with. Anyway, Martin alerted us to this really lovely story that he's investigating with LNER, and it came from a third party, so he wants to track down the reality, and so do we, actually. So if you're listening, David Horn, this one is for you. You're going to like this. Martin says a family was travelling from Leeds to London on a Saturday in January, and the young boy of the party had forgotten his glasses and his contact lenses. He wasn't going to see much of London. Anyway, an LNER employee overheard the conversation and became familiar with this dilemma. And as it happened, she'd accepted a further shift later that day, so was going back to Leeds before returning to King's Cross again later in the same day. And she said to a Toller boy's mum that if she could get somebody to take the lad's glasses and lenses to Leeds station and hand them to her, she'd bring them back to London and give them to the family if they were able to meet her again at King's Cross. Now, that's in the finest tradition of the railway, and especially LNR, isn't it? Anyway, Martin's trying to confirm all this to see if the plan worked and ideally find out the name of the very helpful staff member involved. But like Martin, we thought this was a truly uplifting story. So well done to the staff member. And if you're listening or know who it was, please get in touch and we'll thank them properly on the next show and see if there's any other bits of information we can give. What do you reckon, Richard?
Yeah, it's a lovely story, isn't it? I mean, again, there are so many folks out there working on the railway who just do brilliant things every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's all we have time for this week. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Richard and I have, as usual. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you get notifications when new episodes drop. As we do more and more, that's the best way to ensure you never miss anything new. So, until next time, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Harris, and
it's goodbye from me, Richard Bowker.
Just before we do go, I think it was Trevor Stone sent us an email this week saying that whenever I get to that point in the show, he always thinks of the goodbye from me and his goodbye from him, the old two Ronnies thing. And actually, it goes through my mind every time, and I have to make a conscious effort not to say it, but it is just goodbye from me, Nigel Harris, and
it's goodbye from him.